checking another huge item off the Cappadocia bucket list, a horseback ride through Rose Valley and Red Valley, two of the most iconic valleys in the region. Our host happened to have a friend who owned a horseback tour company, so somehow we got to do one of the top experiences in Cappadocia completely free. Not a bad day. When we arrived, though, the horses were still out on another tour, so we spent some time hanging around the ranch with the chickens, the dog, and the other horses while relaxing in a hammock under the warm sun, waiting for everyone to return. Finally, the horses came back, we saddled up, and headed out toward the valleys at the base of the Red Valley Plateau. One of the ranch dogs decided to join us too. At first, I figured he'd turn around pretty quickly once the trail got difficult, but somehow this little guy ended up completing the entire ride and hike with us like a professional tour guide. As we entered Rose Valley, the landscape immediately started to feel surreal. The trail wound through natural archways carved by thousands of years of erosion, past fairy chimneys, both untouched and carved into homes, storage rooms, and shelters by people centuries ago. Towering poplar trees rose from the valley floor like pillars against the pale cliffs, while narrow, well-worn paths carried us up and down rolling hills of stone that almost looked like frozen waves. Every turn opened up another incredible view of layered rock formations stretching across the valley. The terrain here constantly changes. Smooth ridges suddenly give way to sharp cliffs, hidden tunnels, and narrow passages worn into the soft, tough stone over thousands of years. As we passed hikers making their way through the valley on foot, a few of them looked at us pretty longingly as we rode by on horseback. The horses made those steep climbs a whole lot easier. Eventually, we reached the lookout point near an old church and monastery carved directly into the cliffside. We stopped there for a break, drank fresh pomegranate and orange juice, and explored the monastery complex. Climbing through the carved rooms and tunnels feels like entering another hidden world. Stairways cut directly into the rock lead upward into tiny chambers and openings overlooking the valley behind it. From some windows, the views stretch across layers of red and pink cliffs glowing in the sunlight. Don't hit your head. That's why you wore that thing, huh?
Yeah.
You've done a tunnel or two around here. At one point, I ducked through a narrow tunnel and realized it opened onto a tiny ledge hanging off the side of the cliff.
My. Holy cow. You ain't gonna want to be over here.
With Terry's fear of heights, I knew immediately this was one viewpoint he would not be enjoying. Inside part of the church, sections of the dome still contain remarkably preserved frescoes painted centuries ago, reminding you that these valleys were once important religious centers for Byzantine Christians who lived and worshipped here. Outside, I climbed up onto one of the huge rolling rock formations that looked almost exactly like giant sand dunes, except they're solid stone carved smooth by erosion. Even our canine companion decided this was a good place for a break, stretching out in the shade before continuing the journey with us. After leaving the church area, we continued deeper into Red Valley, where the landscape becomes even more dramatic. The cliffs here glow in reds and oranges, especially later in the day when the sunlight hits them directly. The color comes from iron-rich volcanic deposits layered through the rock. The trail descended through narrow passageways carved into the cliffs where the horses carefully picked their way down steep stone paths barely wide enough to pass through. By the end of the ride, it was easy to understand why horseback riding is one of the most famous things to do in Cappadocia. And somehow every new valley here still feels completely different from the last. Only one more to do before we say goodbye to Turkey and head to our next country.